Okay, so now that we have life in our enemy, let's remove that life. Let's go ahead and set up some collision stuff such that our projectile can collide with our enemy, and we can destroy, well, both of them in that particular case. Now, keep in mind, when I say destroy the enemy, what that really means. So with that, let's spend just a second and talk about collisions. When dealing with collisions, there's a couple of ways that we can go about handling them. One would be just regular rigid body type collisions, and with those we could, find out when two pieces of geometry hit and who it was that we just hit with and what was the point on the geometry in which the contact occurred.
Sounds pretty complex.
Exactly. Or we can take a very simplified approach and we can set up a trigger, and when one of our objects collides or enters into the other one, it's like entering into the trigger location, and then we can simply have that fire off a function that we can then put our code in.
So it's like a penetration check.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're going to do because it's very lightweight and easy to set up. Now, for this type of a collision, what we need to have in place are the following. One, both objects. So I'm just looking at this from the point of view of just two objects that are going to collide. Both objects must have colliders. So let's go ahead and come back over here into Unity and take a look at our prefab down here. Our prefab has a capsule collider on him. Excellent. The other guy must have a collider. Well, who's the other guy? He's our enemy. So let's select our enemy. He has a sphere collider. So we have met that condition. Both of these guys do indeed have colliders. The next thing is one of the objects must have a rigid body. So at least one of them. So in this case, let's take a look. Our enemy, nothing. Let's come down here to our projectile prefab. And with him, rigid body. And if you recall, when we set up the rigid body, we had unchecked use gravity because it just didn't make sense. And we had checked use kinematic, or is kinematic, excuse me, so that we can handle the positioning of this ourselves as opposed to letting the rigid body react by a physics simulation in regards to how it's going to spin away. Or
we're moving it manually as opposed to it being simulated.
That's right. So we're going to keep things very lightweight here as far as physics engine's concerned. Okay, so now that we have that in check, meaning at least one of these guys has a rigid body, the last thing is one of the colliders must have is trigger checked. So with our enemy here, let's go ahead and just take the enemy. And because I'm going to demonstrate checking is enemy or is trigger on the enemy, and then we're going to add this functionality over on our projectile.
Okay.
So, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you could do it either way, it seems.
So, is trigger, check. So we have now met all of the conditions to make a trigger event occur. And so with that, what I'd like to do real quick is come over, grab our help file. And here we are on game objects, so let's kind of cruise down to mono behavior. I just want to get those out there that are new to working with Unity comfortable with jumping into the help file.
Absolutely.
And getting a quick refresher on what functions are available that they can use. So we know we want to use this trigger thing, and as I come down, here's on trigger enter. On trigger enter is called when the collider other enters the trigger. Wow. Does that read weird, or am I just...
it's a little funny, but I see what it's saying.
I see what it's saying. It just reads kind of odd. But anyways, and of course it could be because, once again, it's like 2 in the morning. So, but we have the functionality of on trigger enter that we can go in and override and add our own functionality in there. We have on trigger exit. We have on trigger stay. Then we have the true collision stuff that we were talking about a second ago, where we're looking for collider and rigid bodies, where they've begun touching one another.
And that would be useful if we wanted like our projectile to maybe hit the enemy and it would bounce off in some actual trajectory based on where it hit. Yeah, and we're wanting to use physics to calculate all of that stuff for us. In this case, we want to keep things extremely simple. So we're going to be overriding on trigger enter. So with that, next thing we need to do before putting that code in place is come up with some way for us to locate our enemy in code from the projectile's point of view. So we know who we hit?
Exactly. Now, this is a very simple setup right now. I mean, we have only one enemy. We're not really spawning enemies, and we know his name. So I can use GameObject.find and say enemy, and it's going to find my enemy.
Sure.
That's not a problem. But in this case, what I'm going to do is, again, following along with Casey's setup, I'm going to use tags. Tags are very powerful, very helpful. An example, let's say that you have a bunch of different objects that are all considered collectibles. You could tag all of these guys as collectibles, but they literally could be different things. You could have stamps, you could have butterflies, you could have, hey, it's 2 in the morning cards. And it's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But I could set up a tag called collectibles and put all of these guys, or set all of these guys' tags to collectibles, and then I could have a script simply say, hey, is that object a collectible? By looking at its tag. And even though they're very different objects, meaning your baseball card from My Little Butterfly.
I was going to say, you thought of stamps and baseball cards first.
No, butterflies. You thought of baseball cards. Get it straight, Zach.
Okay.
So, but anyways, but we know they're all collectibles, okay? So we know that because the tag would be set.
Right.
So I could check the name, but what if we had different types of enemies? What if we had, quick, give me some enemy names. The X111, okay. The F15, and the K31R36211.
Wow.
It would not be a lot of fun in our code to say that if the object we just hit was this guy or this guy or this, that's a lot, right? Instead, all of those enemies could have their tag set to enemy, and then I could just simply say, hey, if the object we just hit, if his tag is enemy, I don't care what kind of enemy he is, we just hit him. Let's do some stuff.
Gotcha.
So to set a tag, you'll notice on the game object right here, we've got tag, and right now this guy is untagged. Let's go ahead and drop this down. Now, Unity does give us some defaults that are set up that we can take advantage of, such as if we had a player or a game controller, camera, etc. I'm going to come down here to add a tag. Adding a tag is very easy. I'm just going to come up here to tags, open that up, come down to element 0, and then over here I'm going to type enemy, enter. You'll notice that as soon as I started typing, element 1 popped up. So if I would like to add another tag later, very easy to do. So now that we have set the tag up, we've not actually assigned this tag to our enemy's tag property. So let's grab our enemy again. So tag is still untagged. If we drop down in our list, we will find enemy.
Okay.
So now he's been set. And this is very helpful because now inside our code, we can simply check the guy that we've collided with and say, hey, his tag, is it enemy? And if the answer is yes, then haha, we have hit who we need to hit in order to destroy what we need to destroy.
So if we had multiple objects here that were serving as enemies, we just need to make sure that they all had that enemy tag on them.
Okay. Multiple different kinds of objects.
Gotcha.
So very easy. So you can see how this could be a very powerful system.
Simplifies selection.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into our projectile code. And then from inside our projectile code, what we're going to do is we're going to add the on-trigger event. Once again, bringing this up, I did demonstrate that this exists on the mono behavior in which we have extended, making all of that available to us. And so we're simply going to be overriding on trigger event. And that's going to get called automatically from Unity when we have this collision. So let's go ahead and minimize this guy. And I'm just going to jump down up under update, and it's going to be a void on trigger enter. Now on trigger enter is going to take in a collider. Because that's what it's going to let us know, is because it's all about colliders with the trigger, as we saw back over in the help. As a matter of fact, if I jump back over here real quick, come back down. So again, it's all about the collider. So if we take a look at this guy and jump in here, you'll notice that the function, now again, this is in JavaScript. Everything that we see inside our help at Unity is going to be in JavaScript, but it's very easy to take this stuff and turn it into C# code. So just keep that in mind. That's the format we're looking at. So our function, we're going to be calling the on-trigger event. We're not calling it, but that's what we're setting up. And we have a variable name of type collider. So we just kind of need to reverse the way we say that in C#. So we're going to give our data type first and then our variable name. So let's jump back here. And in order to do that, and again, following along with what Casey had set up, I'm just going to call this other object. So we start out with our type,
which is a collider. A space, and then the variable name that we want to give it. So it could be any variable name. But Casey called it other object.
So we shall do the same. So we'll set this up like such. Now, inside here, let's start simple and get our beginners out there comfortable with doing some debugging. I'm going to do debug.log, and I'm going to log out to the console about something like we hit, and now I'm going to append to the end of that other object dot. Now, it's a collider. Now remember how the components work as far as scripting goes. We talked about this a little bit a few videos back. When we refer to everything we can get to on that component, if there are things up on the object and on other components that would never exist on us, we can get to those things from right here. Meaning that other object is not really the game object, it's the component on the game object.
Sure.
But in most cases, I can simply treat it as the game object, meaning I can simply turn around and say .name. Okay?
Right.
So it's not, since collider, the component, doesn't have a name property, what's name? Well, name is going to be the name of the game object then. So we'll go ahead and set that up. So all I'm doing is basically echoing out to the console, we hit, and then we're going to append to the end of that
the name of whatever we hit.
The name of whatever we hit. So that's all we've got right now. Just that just proves things work. So let's go ahead and save this, jump back over. Now, first thing I'm going to do, hit play, and start missing. Boy, that was amazing.
I was going to say, that was a nice job.
We hit enemy.
Yep.
Okay. Let me go ahead and bring this guy over here. So we hit enemy, we hit enemy. I actually missed him on both sides a second. It was amazing. So again, so we hit him again. Again, so that's 4 times and 1 more to make 5. 5. Now let me bring my console back over. So there we are with all of the hits. So we hit enemy, and the information is simply being echoed out for us.
Right, now he's keeping the console over on a separate monitor. But
that's correct.
While he's actually doing this, you can see these entries appear in the log. So if you've got enough screen space, or if you're using multiple monitors.
I can come down here, and we can clear this, and then cruise on over. Where's he at? Boom.
Oh, okay.
And there you go.
I wasn't sure if focus was going to change. Or...
So there was a whole bunch of collisions.
Yeah.
Oops. Hush.
Fail.
There we go. So anyways, let's go ahead and move that out.
We need to make this multiplayer.
Hush. Okay. So let's hit stop. Now, pretty simple, but obviously when playing an actual game, we're not looking for information to pop up at the bottom of the screen saying, you hit the enemy.
Right.
We want to see some stuff happen, such as we want to get rid of the enemy.
If you hit the enemy.
Okay, exactly. So let's go ahead and jump back over into our code, and let's change this around. We don't need to keep the debug anymore. I just wanted to show everybody that you can make use of that.
Okay.
What we're going to do now is we're simply going to ask our other object if its tag is an enemy. So I can simply say if other object dot tag. Now this is an equality test. So we need to use two equals here. A single equal is going to be an assignment operator.
I always remember it by thinking you're saying the word equal to.
Yeah, okay, it works. Very nice.
So there's 2 equals there.
Okay. So our other objects tag, if it is equal, I like that. If it's equal to enemy, man, we haven't recorded videos together in forever.
It's been a little while.
Yeah, I miss it. All right, so if it's equal to enemy, that means that we did indeed collide with the guy that we're interested in colliding with. Now, we could, let's just block this in. We could do something like, one might be thinking, destroy him. Well, fortunately, destroy is available that we can use. So we can say destroy, and it's looking for an object to destroy. And so the object that we want to destroy is going to be our what?
Other object.
Okay, this is where you got to be careful. If I say destroy other object, right, that does indeed look right. Watch this. And it is going to work.
Okay.
Not the way we think.
So it looks right and it's going to work, but it's not really
I'm going to hit play, hit him. Something just happened. Over here changed.
I know you actually hit him. That was the impressive bit. See?
Now nothing's happening.
Oh.
Now let's stop and play it again, and I want you to focus on this. I want you to look at the game object stack, all of the game, all of the components that are on it, and see what changes. Hit play, fire. Something changed, didn't it?
Yeah. We got a projectile. Hang on.
All right, let's hit stop.
Do it again.
I want you to read off the components we have.
Oh, the components. Gotcha.
Start right here. Transform.
We got our transform. We got our sphere or mesh.
A mesh filter.
Yeah, we got our sphere collider, we got our mesh render, and we have our enemy.
Okay. Let's hit play
Which
again.
is the script, of course. Oh, wow.
Pause. Now, nice thing about pause.
Yeah.
So now, let's read it again.
So yeah, we've got our mesh, we've got our mesh render, we've got our script, but we're missing some stuff.
Who are we missing? Let's hit stop. Who are we missing?
Looks like the sphere collider's gone.
Collider. Let's jump back over here. And what is other object?
It's a collider.
Very good. Other object is the collider. Mm-hmm. And this is what I was talking about earlier. When you refer to something like a tag, tags on the game object, to the game object level.
Sure.
But it's not on the collider, and so the system's set up, it's very robust. It's going to say, oh, well, the tag, okay, that's the game object's tag.
Yeah.
I could have very easily, as I demonstrated a little bit earlier, I could have come in here and I could have said game object just to be very verbose. Mm-hmm. Okay, and this right here, same exact thing. This just keeps things nice and simple.
Right.
But there are situations you need to be careful in. In this case, I really do want to destroy the game object. Mm-hmm. Because by saying destroy other object, I'm just saying destroy the one component.
Right.
And it's cool because now you see that you do have the ability to go in and destroy just parts of what makes up a game object.
Which is very interesting.
So now, to do that, I would simply come in here and say dot game object.
Gotcha.
Now I'm referring to the actual object. So let's save that out, come back and see what it looks like now. It's bam, destroyed.
Yeah, and you hit him on the first go, too. That was the really impressive
Okay,
part.
Back off.
Well, I was going to say we could throw some, like a comment into that code and just say this entire block of code is irrelevant when Buzz is playing.
Would you like to just line up a series of 30 players across, and when I hit fire, they all fire? I won't miss a darn thing.
Sweet.
So what I'm getting at here is that you need to make sure when you are working with components and you're working with a game object, be aware of what you're really working with. Now, do we really want to do this? No, because at this point the game just got very boring.
Kind of dull, a little dry.
The enemy had the enemy script object attached, okay? Mm-hmm. So that script component had been attached to the game object enemy, but now we've killed the enemy. So you could say that instance of the enemy script is gone. Which means it's no longer running.
So nothing ever resets.
So nothing resets. So there's no enemy coming back down the screen again. And now here I am, lonely, with nothing to do in the game.
Well, kind of the drawback of our system by which we don't really have multiple enemies. We're kind of pulling the wool over the player's eyes by taking one enemy and using them over and over and over again. And what we've just done is we've killed that one enemy. So now there's nothing left to do.
Absolutely. So what we need to do is we need to reset them. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to jump back into code. And let's get this line out because that's no good. Though it did a good job of demonstrating a very important concept when dealing with components and the game object. So let's go ahead at this point and change the code to something that we recognize, something like move back to the top of the screen. So if I was to say other object dot game object or transform, because the collider doesn't have a transform. So if I say dot transform dot position equals new vector 3, and with this, let me just take wherever he's at right now. So I'm going to say other object dot transform dot position dot x, comma, and I'm just going to jump down just to keep this kind of easy to read. Actually, for y, let's just move them straight up.
Sure.
We know that we want them up at 7, right? Mm-hmm. So 7.0f. And then just to stay consistent, let's do this. Other object dot transform dot position dot z. Close this off like such. So again, this variable is holding a reference to our object, the enemy. And so we're just simply talking to him and positioning him accordingly to make him jump straight back up. But we do have a problem with this code, and that is, well, let's take a look.
Now, you want to scale the enemy up before we try this?
You want to scale him up?
Yeah, make him easier to hit.
Jumping back over, back off. I'm going to hit play and watch what happens.
Something.
Let's let him jump down. There we go. Good location.
Ooh, look at that.
What's our problem?
Well, yeah, they're not getting a random location.
The game's easy for me to play now. Zach.
Yeah.
Zach's happy.
We have Buzz mode.
That's right. It's in Buzz mode. So not good.
As long as you can hit that first enemy.
And this is something that we addressed earlier without really talking about it, because we said right out the gate, we want to make sure that he's got a random position horizontally.
And now that randomization is not being called on, because right now that only happens if he hits all the way to the bottom of the screen.
That's right. Now, if we were to jump into enemy, let's take enemy and just kind of drag him over here by a projectile. We want to basically do this stuff right here. Now, let me point this out to our viewers. What I'm about to demonstrate is something that kind of steps outside of the realm of beginner content, even though it's very easy. And it steps up a notch to kind of beginner intermediate content. I would like for my projectile to gain access to the instance of this enemy class, which is the actual enemy component attached to the enemy I just hit. And I would like to be able to call upon this myself from over in projectile. So a particular projectile calling upon a particular enemy's set position and speed.
Gotcha. So you can effectively like do a real reset and get a new location.
Absolutely. So watch this. First things first, all of these guys are private since they've not been explicitly told to be public. I'm going to make this guy public. That means that I can now see him outside of this class. Let's go ahead and save this. Now what I need to do is come back over here into my projectile, and all of this was great, but I don't want to do all of that. Instead, I want to just simply say, you know, reset that position, set the position and speed, and be done with it. So to pull this off, I need to get the component that is on the enemy, the enemy component, because that's what we've called our script, enemy. So we need the enemy component on our enemy. And to do this, first thing I'd like to point out is that other object has some functionality built onto it called get component. So with get component, I can turn around and get a particular component that's attached. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep everything very clear. I'm going to step up to our game object. So here we are at the game object. Now give me a component. So get component. Now take a look at what we need to provide it.
A string?
A string type. Or we could say type of as well. Well, we'll get into that later. So string, what component type? Well, what is our component called?
We named it enemy.
Yep. We've seen components called things like a camera or a directional light or a mesh filter. This custom component, the script object, is called enemy. So that is the type that we are dealing with. All right. So here's how we can go about getting the type. But I want to store a reference to this so that I can then turn around and talk to it. So let's jump down here, or back over here, excuse me. To hold a reference to something, I just need a variable. Well, anytime that you set up a variable, you must first declare the variable. So when declaring a variable, what's the first thing you need to do?
You need to know its type.
You need to know its type. So int, float, string, etc.
Sure.
In this
what
case,
type is this?
Our type is an enemy. We're defining the type. The class is where we're saying this type is a projectile.
Okay.
So coming down here, the type we know is going to be, and watch the coloration of it. It's type. Look at the coloration here. That's a type.
Yeah.
Have anybody else around? What if I jump down to the next line and say, make an int?
An int or
that's
string.
Like string. Well, actually, those are the value types a little bit different. But anyways,
right. But so, I see what you're getting at. It is noticing that should be a data type.
So here we are with our type enemy. Now the next thing that we're going to do is give it just a variable name. I'm just going to lowercase enemy equals, and we'll do this. But there's still a problem with this, and that is what we're getting back is not of type enemy. And you can see this down here in the error in the box that's just popped where it says cannot implicitly convert type unityengine.component, because it is a component that we got, get component. It can't convert that to enemy.
So we got to cast it.
So we need to cast it. And casting is very easy. There's a couple ways. We could say all of this as enemy, or I'm just so used to doing this because I've been doing this forever. Cast type enemy. Now watch this. Boom, that went away.
Yeah, and this is why you were saying this wasn't like we're kind of going from beginner kind of up to intermediate.
Yeah, this is a little more involved.
Because I see what this is doing, but this is not the most intuitive line of code in the world.
It is once you get used to it. So let's jump back over here and let's take public off for just a second. Let's save this so I can make a point. So I'm going to come back over here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say enemy dot, look at this. we can now gain access to all this stuff on enemy. A whole bunch of stuff here. So we're looking for the, what was it called?
Set position and speed.
So set doesn't exist. Again, it's private at the moment. We want to expose it. That's why I wanted to come back and show this.
Gotcha.
I thought this would be very nice for everyone to see. So public, let's save that out. Now let's jump back over.
Now IntelliSense should
enemy.
pick it up.
Look at that. We're sitting right there at it.
Very
So
nice.
set position and speed. So let's just go ahead and call it like such. And, well, let's save and run. That's all there is to it. So come back over here and play. And hit. Whoa. Hit. Whoa. Hit. Use that wrapping. I missed. Yeah. I can't believe it.
I can.
I'll be quiet.
Sorry. I shouldn't laugh.
Ah!
There you go.
Oh, no. I have the worst luck in the world.
You do.
Okay. So, working well.
It is.
So we can see that we are reaching over into the enemy component and actually working with its data. Okay, so we're controlling its behavior, which is fantastic. So let's jump back over here. There's one last thing that we need to do, and that is the projectile itself just keeps on cruising.
Yeah.
And we need for the projectile to actually die as well. So to destroy ourselves, we're going to come in here and we're going to say destroy. Now, I'm going to just, again, to continue making a point every time I can. We know that I can say this, and that's referring to myself, but this is a component, okay, so we don't want to destroy the script component, so we could say this dot game object, like such, but instead, we could just simplify this and say game object. We've been doing this all along with things like transform. Now, in this particular case, we actually have a cache transform out, as we were talking just a little bit about iPhone stuff. But I think everywhere else, though, we haven't taken the time to do that. So here we are just straight out talking to the transform and then going down from there.
Right.
So here, just talk to the game object. So destroy game object. And in this case, the game object that the instance of this class projectile is attached to,
is whatever laser we're happening.
Is whatever just did the collision. Yeah. That's right. So let's go ahead and save, jump back over, hit play, and boom, and they're both gone.
Nice.
And it's starting to look like a game.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really felt that Casey did an excellent job. That was actually a nice compliment there.
That was.
He did an excellent job with the game that he picked to demo here in Unity.
Yeah.
Unity has so much power, and it's so easy to make sophisticated games, but by doing something this simple, it really does help keep a lot of the different topics that all go together in the creation of a game very concise, very clear. So let's go ahead and stop it. This is working beautifully, and with that, that's everything that I wanted to demonstrate in this video. Any questions?
No, I think we're good.
So the bottom line is we have set up the ability to have Unity call the onTriggerEnter, and for this to be called, the two objects that we are looking at having interact with one another, one of those, both of them have to have colliders.
Yeah.
One has to have a rigid body attached to it.
Yeah.
One of them needs the isTrigger checked on the collider. And then for us to be able to control things on the guys, that we're going to go in and say is kinematic on the rigid body and turn off the gravity, because obviously we don't need gravity.
Right.
So that is everything I wanted to demonstrate, and that is going to wrap up this video. Thanks, guys.